A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend, Constitutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's L-E-N-A-R-D. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and an occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! Warning. This episode contains some audio and or video glitches. It is not your equipment.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Constitutionalist Podcast. Joining me today is Dr. Bob Thiel. Sounds like T-E-A-L, but it's pronounced T-H-I-E-L. So, and of course, if you're looking at BitChute, Brighteon, Daily Motion, Rumble, or YouTube behind the video, when I edit, it will be at the bottom of the screen. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Bob. How are you?
Very fine. Thanks for having me on, Joseph.
It's like I always say, could be better, could be worse, right? Before I complain too much, I remind myself, a whole lot of other people got things far worse off than I. So it doesn't stop me from whining from time to time, but you know.
Well, my dad used to always say, I complained I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So you're here today to talk not privacy. I can't talk. Quite the opposite of privacy. Prophecy, which kind of lets the cat out of the bag of things to come. So there's no privacy involved in it. It's all publicly out there. That was actually a fortuitous slip, I guess.
Well, actually, there's different types of prophecies. There's biblical ones, which is what I focus on, but I'm also fairly knowledgeable about Chinese prophecies, Hindu prophecies, Muslim prophecies, and within the Greco-Roman Catholic world, your slip of the tongue is interesting.
Oh, okay. Finally,
okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, the video still seems okay. It seems to be back in sync. I don't know what happened there, but as you were joking before we did hit record, you had audio problems with other shows, and now we're having both audio and video problems. So at any rate, I will clip that chunk out.
You can edit that. That's fine.
So you were starting to say, what were you starting to say about other prophecies other than biblical?
Right. Well, I'll give you background a little bit. I wrote a book back in 2009 called 2012 and the Rise of the Secret Sect. And in the book, I looked at Mayan prophecies, writings from Nostradamus, Hindu prophecies, Native American Indian prophecies, Chinese prophecies, Hindu prophecies, etc. Right? And basically, and I'll let the cat out of the bag, to use your term, I said the world was not going to end in 2012.
Right.
Okay?
The Mayan calendar was cyclical and it just rolled into a new cycle, but we hadn't fully discovered all of the Mayan information. And I think a lot of people knew it, but you can sell stuff with the end is nigh, the world's coming to the end kind of hysteria.
Yeah, well, what's funny about that is because I said the world was not ending, I didn't get as much coverage, but I did do probably 100 secular radio interviews associated with it. And speaking of those other prophecies, I think your audience might find this interesting. So I'm being interviewed by a woman out of Sacramento, California. And it's over the telephone. And she says, look, I looked at your book. You talk about the beast and the false prophet, the Antichrist and stuff. Everybody's going to know when that's coming. I said, no. She said, well, what do you mean? I said, listen, the Chinese have these prophecies. They say that beautiful people come from the West. We're going to have to cut this. Let me get, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize. Actually, I have two phones on my desk, one that doesn't ring and the other that I usually disconnect, and I forgot to do that. Okay. So let me take it back to going on Sacramento. Okay. Okay. So this woman interviews me and she says, your book talks about the beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist. Everybody's going to know about this stuff when it happens. I said, oh no. She said, well, why not? I said, well, for example, the Chinese have prophecies. I said, these are from the Tang dynasty, somewhere around 6th to 9th century. All right. And they say beautiful people come from the West. Okay, let's see. What's west of China? Europe. Then they've got one that says China now has a saint, but he's not that good of a person. Well, first of all, Chinese don't really have saints. And someone's not that good of a person who is a saint. Antichrist? All right. So you've got a billion and a half Chinese. Their prophecies looking forward to something like that. Then the Hindus. Hindus have prophecy that says in the time of the end, starting somewhere around now, by the way, it hasn't happened yet, around the time of the end, a new age is going to arise. The Bhagwan Kalki is going to rise up, and a man on a white horse bows down before him, according to an ancient picture. So, white horse is the fourth horse of the apocalypse, perhaps. And this people should take up arms to support him. Now, there's just over 1 billion Hindus. You got 1 billion Hindus looking for this. Now, back in 2009, I speculated that, you know what? I don't think this has to be an Indian of Hindu religion. I said that on the air because I didn't think it had to be. Well, get this. Back in 2016, a member of the Indian parliament in India said that he thought that Donald Trump was the Bhagwan Kalki. Now, I don't believe Donald Trump is the Bhagwan Kalki that they're talking about, but the reality is that proved my speculation that it could be a Caucasian who's not Hindu. So you got 1 billion of them looking, Hindus looking for this leader to rise up. Plus you got the Chinese. Well, what about the Greco-Roman Catholics? Well, they've got a bunch of what they call private prophecies about somebody they call the great monarch. Now, according to their prophecies, the great monarch will rise up when there's lack of religion in Europe. When Europe becomes less religious, check. Europe will have a time of trouble. Jesus talked about the beginning of sorrows. And then this guy will rise up. He'll make changes to the religion. That reminds me of Daniel chapter 11, verses 36 to 37. And he won't be real popular with some of the clergy because he does this, but a pope who does miracles will say he's the guy, and he'll be accompanied by signs and wonders. Okay, now we know these things are warned against in 2 Thessalonians, all right? But there are Greco-Roman Catholic prophecies. When I say Greco, I mean Greek Orthodox Byzantine prophecies, most of them 1,000 years old or more. And with the Roman Catholic prophecies, some from last century, this century, but others going back over 1,000 years as well. So you've got roughly 1.5 billion plus people looking forward to the time this leader is going to rise up from the Catholics. Again, you add the Hindus and the Chinese. All of a sudden, you got a lot of people. And then there's one other major set of people out there. There's a bunch of sets of people, but another major set are the Muslims. Now, I wrote a book about Islamic prophecies called Islamic and Biblical Prophecy for the 21st Century, which, by the way, the ebook is free at CTP.org. All right. But I knew something about Islamic prophecies back when I wrote it, but I learned a whole lot more when I was doing it. But what they teach is at the time of the end, an Islamic leader will rise up. He will unite the Muslim nations, particularly in North Africa and the Middle East, maybe others. He's called the Imam Mahdi. Now, there's basically two versions of Islam.
And the 12ers are trying to rush in Armageddon, right? That's the whole subsect of Shiaism, the 12ers.
Correct.
Kind of like in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book. They're not the only ones. The Om Srinyoko, the Supreme Truth Christian doomsday cult that existed back earlier, also felt, although the Bible doesn't, support the notion that, reining in evil to rush the return of Christ is okay. I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. It's not okay, nor is it really okay for the 12ers either, but they don't let that stop them. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. There have been people throughout history who think that they should cause chaos and riots and whatever.
Yeah.
And actually, within Shia Islam, that's actually the predominant view. Now, for your listeners, Shiites make up about 10-15% of the Muslims. Basically, most of them are in Iran. There's some in Iraq. The Assad regime, which fell, he was actually Shiite, even though most of Syria is actually Sunni Muslim. Sunni Muslims make up 80-85% of Muslims. There's another small group called Sufis. They're like 2 or 3 or 4%.
What are the Uyghurs? What are the Uyghurs being oppressed in China? They're Islamic. Are they Shia Sunni, or they're their own? I thought.
Yeah, I think they're their own as well, but I don't know enough about that aspect of it. But anyway, getting back to the Sunni Muslims, which are the majority, the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, which is a Sunni group, wants to have a new caliphate running from Spain to, Indonesia, I think. I don't think they're going to get Spain, but they might get from Morocco to Afghanistan. And they want this. And so according to Islamic prophecy, a leader will rise up and people will support him. He's going to help make their people more prosperous and militarily stronger. Well, as it turns out, in the book of Daniel, chapter 11, we read about a guy called the King of the South. And while there were some previous fulfillments of some of these scriptures, and the anti-biblical types, by the way, foolishly tell you that the book of Daniel wasn't written until the 2nd century because it was so accurate regarding Antiochus Epiphanes and some of these other things. They think there's no way God could have had written.
Right. They claim it was post-dated, right? Yes.
Yeah. But let me just address that before I get to this for a second. Okay. The reality is, this is actually kind of funny. About a month or two ago, I found there was a new thing came out about a Dead Sea Scroll. And one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which they say could have dated as early as 230 BC, was part of the book of Daniel. And it was written in Greek. Now, why does that matter? Because Daniel didn't write in Greek. He wrote in Hebrew and Aramaic. And so this was obviously translated from something before that. In addition to that, there's some other information about Belshazzar being the last of the Babylonian kings that was in the book of Daniel. And the reality is, until something was discovered in 1875 or 6, certain chronicles, nobody knew this. All right. So whoever supposedly wrote Daniel in the 2nd century, the 1st century BC, would not have had access to this, would not have known this as a fact. So that blows their hypothesis.
Right.
Well, anyway,
and thank God for the Dead Sea Scrolls. To me, that is a miracle. Those were put there for now so that that proves indeed all those books as real from when they came. And it took till modern technology till now. Those are so fragile. Some could be scanned by X-ray, by microwave, and now newly found ways to scan them, to layer them, and be able to read them without having to unroll them, because if you try to unroll them, they'll disintegrate. So I obviously those were divinely ordered, so to speak, that those be put aside for us now.
Well, what's interesting about that, before I get into the prophecies themselves, is they have what's called the Great Isaiah Scroll. And that scroll is over, I think, at least 1,000 years older than any of the other fragments that we had, or books of the Old Testament. And so, or maybe it's only a few hundred years older. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it's 1,000 years older, I think. And because people said, "Oh, how can you trust the Bible? How do you know it didn't change?" And so you've got that.
Dead Sea Scrolls prove them, right? Yeah.
Right. Now,
looks like we've got another frozen. Okay, hold on. You froze up again. So yeah, pick back up again. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove they really hadn't changed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The Dead Sea Scrolls show that the Bible has not changed. Critics said it did. We've got proof the opposite. Now, getting back to the book of Daniel, in the 11th chapter, there's some verses that talk about somebody called the King of the South. It says that this King of the South is going to make a lying deal with the King of the North. Both of them are going to lie to each other. Kind of reminds me of what happened before World War II between Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. Okay, they made a lying deal with themselves. So this is in the 11th chapter of the book of Daniel.
But that would have been east-west then, right? Not north-south.
That would have been a little different. This is not King of the North, King of the South. Anyway,
yes.
So what happens, according to the book of Daniel, is a couple of things. One is that the King of the North is going to violate the deal. And that's consistent with a prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, verses 26 and 27, that a prince, this prince is a European, by the way. He's called the King of the North in Daniel 11, but he's a prince when he confirms this deal. A lot of people think it's going to be some kind of a peace deal. And it's broken in the middle of it after 3.5 years. It's broken. And you read in Daniel 11, verse 31, the abomination is fed up at the same time, all that stuff. Well, what's it got to do with Islamic prophecy? Turns out Muslims have a prophecy, a bunch of them, but one of them says that their leader will make a deal with a Roman Catholic European leader. Okay, well, I see that in the Old Testament. Okay. And get this, he's going to break the deal after 3.5 years. After 7-year deal, he's going to break. Okay. Now understand, for your listeners, Muhammad had the Bible. Okay, or at least he had access to it. Okay,
right. Well, Genesis is in the Quran, Moses is in there, Jesus is in there, but just not as a divine. Yes.
Right.
That's what many claim. Islam is a Me Too, that Muhammad, I'm not taking a position here, folks. I'm just saying the theory, right? Muhammad saw, I want a religion for my people. Take the people of the book, as we're known, Jews and Gentiles, Christians, and then expand that into a supposedly new third religion that was supposed to supplant the others.
Well, I'm going to agree with you and contradict you.
Okay.
Because some of that is what I used to think. And some of it's correct and some of it's not.
Yeah, I'm just saying that is a theory. I'm not taking a position on it here.
Let me give you more perspective from the Islamic position. Islam says that Abraham had the original religion. And then Moses came along and God added some things. But the Jews messed certain things up, basically. So then God sent Jesus as the Messiah, by the way. And he added stuff and fixed them. But the Christians kind of split into two groups. And one of the groups really messed things up. So,
Jesus certainly never said, go forth and create 100 billion different denominations like we got today. That was humans that screwed that up. Yes. And we're still today screwing it up. But yes, continue.
Okay. Anyway, so what Islam teaches, or Muhammad believed, or said he believed, is that God let him have the Quran to add to this, but that he was restoring the original faith of Abraham. So he claimed to not come up with a new religion, but instead
A restoration
clarify
of the
it.
original. Okay. Although we call it and consider
Okay, so
it
that's
a new
basically what.
religion today. Yes, we consider it a new religion today. Uh-oh, you're freezing
Right.
again.
That was considered kind of new then too. All right. So anyway,
Uh-oh, you are frozen again.
and
We're
Muslims,
having technical
and
difficulties. You froze again. You froze right after
right.
saying, yeah, it was kind of new then, and then you were going to go into something else and you froze
Okay.
again. So pick back up.
All right.
Well, this is going to
Okay.
be a choppy episode. I'll have to edit parts out.
Okay. Getting back to it. All right. So getting back to the book of Daniel and Islam, they teach that a European Catholic leader, Roman Catholic leader, is going to make this peace deal. Israel's going to be involved somehow, but that this deal will be agreed to by the leader of the Muslims. A Muslim leader will agree to it. It will be broken in the middle of it, and for 3.5 years, Muslims teach, Antichrist will reign, and then Jesus will return. That's what Islam teaches. Now, the beast and Antichrist will reign for that 3.5 years, and afterward, Jesus will return. Now, the difference with Islam and Christianity is Islam teaches when Jesus returns, he's going to tell everybody that Islam is the original faith and everybody needs to be Muslim. That's what they say Jesus is going to teach. Now, one reason I wrote my book.
Oh, what an inconvenient time to freeze.
It's not Islam.
You froze again. But yeah, I mean, a whole lot of Muslims will not agree with what you just said. Whether you're right or they're right, again, I'm not taking a position on. From what I've read of the Quran, they're expecting the Mahdi. Nothing about Christ's return. But I'm not a scholar on Islam by any stretch. So,
well, within Islam, they have the Quran and what are called hadiths. And those specify Jesus coming back. Now, usually they call him Isa, by the way, or the son of Miriam. Now, by the way, for your listeners, the word Jesus, by the way, is kind of an interesting word. The Aramaic, his name was Yeshua, but since the Bible was written in Greek, that's not in there. Okay. So what is in there, though, is a word that we never use. It's Iesus. That's actually the Greek word. But what happened is in English, we changed that I to a J and we switched it to Jesus. That's how we get Jesus. And one of the reasons I mention that is I remember there's a Protestant song about Jesus or something about that name. And like this name was specifically inspired that way, and it wasn't. I mean, God allowed it, don't get me wrong, but that's not what the New Testament uses. I mean, we use the word Jesus because that conveys what everybody understands.
right.
But it
well,
was not.
And that's the other thing is various versions of the Bible were written in Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. And
none in Latin.
Well, there were some that they have Latin Mass today.
Yeah, but that was not from the Bible. That was a translation from Jerome in the late 4th, early 5th century. I grew up Roman Catholic. I thought a lot of early stuff was in Latin. It was not. Even in Rome, what we have in terms of early church writings are all in Greek. So when you hear people talk about the traditional Latin Mass, Catholic scholars will flat out tell you that was not what was done. It was either in Hebrew or in Greek was what they originally used. And then Rome, they did speak Latin at Rome. So Latin became popular, but it wasn't original. And none of the Bible was written in Latin. You have what's called the Latin Vulgate. That was Jerome's translation. And the Pope told him to do this. So he translated it, and you got what's called the Latin Vulgate. But that was not original language. Again, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, and part of Daniel's in Aramaic. The New Testament is in Greek, and occasionally a few Aramaic words are used.
Compared to our modern time, that is still kind of an old foundation language of the Bible, even given what you're saying, I would dare say, in most people's minds. And the translations get screwed up no matter what version you read. That's how we have, again, like a bazillion different denominations. People warping translations and taking a word and saying, oh, that wasn't right. It really was such and such.
Well, that's part of it. Also, basically, tradition and compromise, and ego gets involved as well. So there are a lot of,
absolutely, yeah.
Right?
That's
a lot of factors.
Let me say it again. Jesus never said create 100 different denominations. We, as humans, did all that, screwed it all up.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.
So anyway, that's getting back. That's again tying into the Muslim prophecies. So yeah, there's different predictions out there, and now I rely on biblical prophecies. Why are any other ones important? Well, they're important because they're I think they're part of Satan's plan. He has a plan to deceive people. You know, you read 2 Thessalonians, and it talks about people are going to believe a lie because they didn't have the love of the truth. And you've got, Satan's, one way he's really stupid, another way he's not stupid. So throughout the centuries, he's had prophets, prophetess, seers, astrologers, whatever, make various predictions. Like, for example, I'll give another one. In the book of Daniel, chapter 11, it talks about this king of the south. Now, this king of the south, according to Daniel 11, verse 40, will go against the king of the north and get defeated. Okay, so he's going to lose. But it also says in Daniel 11 that people who eat at his table will betray him. Okay, so somebody in the confederation of this Muslim confederation is going to betray him. And when you read Daniel 11, 40 to 43, you find out that Edom escapes, as do the chief people of Ammon escape. Well, most people have heard of Nostradamus.
Yes. I even mentioned in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, because there were falsified prophecies about 9/11 and still others that were there that people try to attribute to 9/11. So, yeah, I've always been fascinated with Nostradamus myself. At any rate, please continue.
Okay, so anyway, what he says is that the great Arab, and I believe the great Arab is the Imam Mahdi, the king of the south of biblical prophecy, says the great Arab will be betrayed by the Turks. Okay, well, so I believe, and I've been to Turkey my wife and I have been to Turkey multiple times. The Turks are very pragmatic people. I believe when they see that the European beast is way more powerful than the Islamic king of the south,
they are still now part of NATO, and I have often said, I thought we should have sided with the military in overthrowing. You said Assad before, so I got that name. It's stuck. Erdogan. He sided with the Islamic terrorists more, right? Like we also, the whole Kurdish thing. They have been our allies going back further than Turkey ever was. And of course, Erdogan wants to continue to suppress part of what would be a Kurdistan if post-World War I and World War II, things would have been actually divvied up more properly.
Well, you pointed out the United States has betrayed the Kurds multiple times throughout history. I think they're kind of used to it. It's terrible to say that.
Well, it's like the Northern
so
Alliance in Afghanistan also, right?
Right.
We threw them under the bus after we helped them to kick out the Soviets, and now again, Biden withdrawal threw them under the bus again. So, so they know how the Kurds feel. Yeah.
So anyway, so the Bible talks about the king of the south being betrayed and who's going to betray him. And again, Nostradamus said the same thing. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So basically, with the non-biblical prophecies, some of which I think Satan is going to use to deceive people. I'll give a classic.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Chaos and division are part of his way to try to upset and upend the plan. But yes.
Well, in Daniel chapter 11, which is 29 and 30, it talks about a naval confrontation. Now, you talked about the word about mistranslations, and the word there actually means the Western lands, but a lot of times you see the word Cyprus. And anyway, according to a Roman Catholic prophecy, this is going to involve the United States and or Britain going into the Mediterranean and encountering a European naval force. Now, I believe that's going to happen. Now, interestingly, the Roman Catholic prophecy tells the Europeans, don't be afraid when this happens. And so it looks like it's more of an encounter, not that they're actually shooting at each other, but that somehow the United States goes in there and does something that scares them off. And so, again, there are prophecies out there I believe Satan has put there to dissuade people from believing biblical prophecies are being fulfilled. For example, I believe when that naval encounter occurs, that people in our church are going to go out and say, this is Daniel 11, 29, 30, 31, whatever, being fulfilled right now. Okay? We'll be called fundamentalists, extremists, radicals.
Oh, of course.
Other names, homophobes, whatever. Okay. Other names. And then they're going to say, oh, no, look, we have a prophecy that said this was going to happen. It's not this big a deal. This isn't it. Okay. So I believe that Satan's got this all set up. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's helpful to know what's going to happen. The Apostle Paul said that Christians are not supposed to be ignorant of Satan's devices. And we know about signs and lying wonders. They're prophesied.
Yeah.
And false prophets. Jesus talked about false prophets.
Right. I was exactly going to put false prophets are in there to try to muddy the waters. Well, that prophecy didn't come true. They're there to muddy the water of the prophecy that is sound and solid and is going to be fulfilled. And even the Bible says, none shall know the time, right? Because indeed, this is all meant to be confusing. And indeed, it's all on God's time, on God's plan, and we humans keep trying to interject ourselves in it.
If you look in the Gospels, Matthew 24, Luke 21, and the 13th chapter of the book of Mark, Jesus lists all kinds of things to watch out for. And, the last verse of Mark 13:37, what I say to you, I'll watch. So and by the way, Jesus referred to Daniel, by the way. He says, when you see the abomination, desolation spoken of for Daniel the prophet, blah, 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 blah. Let him here understand. So it's not that we won't know anything. What I've tended to denounce, okay, you may remember the late Harold Camping.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, back in 2012, he said the world's going to end in May.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, again, going back to just shortly after the time of Christ, there were people saying, the end is nigh. These are the end times. For over 2,000 years, World War I, our Civil War, people thought were the ringing of the end times. World War I, World War II, 9/11. The Iraq
Well, the
War,
problem-
the Afghanistan War.
Well, one of the problems is people have not looked what actually Jesus said. So when Harold Camping, by the way, he was an engineer and he did all kinds of stuff with numbers. He got the age of the world wrong. He got all kinds of dates wrong, but he did his numerical calculations. Jesus didn't say, whoever's the smartest math genius, that's who you should listen to, because this is all based on that. No, he said, you'll see this and this and this and this and this. And then when you see this, now this is time to do something. All right. So we believe that we will see some of these things and we believe we will point them out. It's actually one of the reasons why we're on, let's say, 2 shortwave stations to cover the entire world. We're on European gospel radio to cover Europe. We're on a dozen or so radio stations in the US and on stations in Africa, in addition to, of course, being on the internet, because we believe when the time will be there, we're going to explain to people what's going on. But I'm convinced it'll be called hate speech or various other, whatever other terms, to silence us. Okay. I was silenced in retrospect, by the way, for saying before anybody had heard of COVID that something bad's going to come. Don't believe everything the pro-vaccine people tell you. Believe the Bible. Some things are going to happen. And that got censored 3.5 years after COVID. Someone went back at YouTube and pulled it off.
Of course, everything around the Wuhan hysteria has been censored and still is. Just our speaking what we've just spoken might get this banned from YouTube. So watch for BitChute, Brighteon, Daily Motion, and Rumble, because who knows if YouTube is going to decide to say, oh, no, you can't say that stuff and pull this down.
Specifically, we're on all those stations all those platforms you just said for that reason. But here's one. I did one called Disney's Abominable Promotions, when they were promoting sexual immorality to children. Okay. You know how long that lasted on YouTube? 16 minutes. Plus or minus.
Yeah. All right. Now, I think enough's been said. People get the point. Or again, this will be strike number 10,000 and my channel might get pulled entirely. And we've had audio and video issues, so I don't quite know how much time we've actually got in the can yet. I know when we started, I know what time it is now, but I don't know what all is usable at this point. But I do want to start to wrap it up. And to tie to prophecy, known fulfilled prophecy, I want to go back to the Christ prophecies and tie that to anti-Semitism. Yeah, for those looking behind the scenes, for the benefit of the audio 25 platforms and the transcript, he's holding up his book, Proof Jesus is the Messiah book. But yeah, I want to tie it to
prophecies.
Yeah, the anti-Semitism of today. Oh, for sure, minimal 300 prophecies were fulfilled, and several of them being that Jesus had to die on the cross and rise again. So blaming Jews of today, or even the Jews of the time, that there were some Jewish leaders wanted to hold their own power, therefore wanted to give Jesus up to Rome to put on the cross rather than Barabbas. It is to blame God, which is indeed where it lies. It's God's fault. It was God's plan. Those Jews were part of God's plan to condemn Jesus and put him on the cross. To blame them and Jews of today is just ridiculous. I just wanted to get that out there, and I'm sure that's something you agree with me on.
Yeah, it's what's interesting. The Bible specifically says
you froze again.
The Bible says God. Okay. Anyway, when I was
you froze again right when you started to say the Bible says. So you agree with that, right? Anti-Semitism is anti-God.
Yes, that part's absurd. Jesus was to die. It was part of the plan. On the other hand, when I held this book up, if you ever heard of a group called Jews for Jesus, I had them read chapters of my book, and I shared with them stuff they didn't realize. That, by the way, if modern Jews would believe some of their ancient writings, like not just the Bible, but from the Talmud, the Mishnah, and the Gemara, they would actually realize that Jesus is the Messiah according to some of their writings, but they've tended to overlook those.
Yeah, Jews for Jesus. Rabbi Kurt Schneider in the Hillsdale area of Michigan here also is a Messianic Jew. So yeah, he's part of that group. So yeah, I'm well aware of that. And he's got a group called Taking the Rainbow Back, a return to God's 7 colors, not the bastardized 6-color version. So yeah, I'm well familiar with them. There are a lot of Messianic Jews. It again just is a kind of thing that doesn't fit the modern secular narrative, so it's got to be suppressed.
Yeah, well, yeah, the early church, by the way, was Jewish. First, all the leaders were Jewish. They all kept the Sabbath, they did unclean meats, kept the holy days, and we, by the way, still do that today. Although we wouldn't consider ourselves part of the Messianic Jew movement. But
no, but technically, as a Christian, if you want to call me a Messianic Jew, I got no problem with that, because that's what we really are. And so many Christians don't understand that. Jesus, born a Jew, fulfilled the Jewish scriptures. He himself is cited in Matthew as saying, I didn't come to erase the prophets in the scriptures. I came to fulfill. But they don't read their whole Bible in full context, which is why I created Christitutionalist podcast. The whole Bible in full context, not just picking and choosing one, the kumbaya around the campfire singing Jesus and leaving out all that other tough love stuff they don't want to be bothered with.
I understand that.
At any rate, indeed, we are now technically 45 minutes in. I try to keep my shows around 30 minutes. Again, with the audio video issues, I don't know exactly what kind of minutes I actually got until I get into the editing. So to wrap things up, you mentioned a website. The usual closing question is, do you have a website for people to reach out to you and learn more about you and your books?
Yeah, we've got a couple of them. I mentioned CTP.org, but we have another one called COGwriter.com. And that one, every day I post 3 or more articles about news, prophecy, and how things are lining up.
COG as a cog in the... Huh?
Yeah. COGwriter.com.
Oh,
Writer.
T-O-G. C is in... Okay, C is in cat, O is in Orwell, G is in God, writer.com, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Those audio video issues again, but we spelled it out now, so it'll even be plain in the transcript for all who may read it. And I will put it on the bottom of the screen. And then you mentioned one more.
CCOG.org.
Okay, I'm still not hearing that right, because we're a lot of fun today with all these problems. But, hey, it happens from time to time, right? Thank you, Dr. Bob Thiel, Thiel, for coming on Christitutionalist podcast today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Joseph.
Thank you for having tuned in for Christitutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold, If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Tyrone X. On the Edge, Tyrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Tyrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.